What is up, everyone? Corn O'Keefe back yet again, and as the title implies, I'm bringing you another versus battle, folks. And today, I have a good friend with me and a member of the Crusaders of Verity, as well as a member of the HQ squad. I'm talking about my good friend Beegerman. Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Vijay. I'm happy to be here, hoping to
Awesome.
give you the best quality content that I can, and this is gonna be fun.
Awesome. And yeah, as the title implies, Benjamin and I are bringing you Emperor Palpatine, aka Darth Sidious, versus God, aka Chuck, from Supernatural. Star Wars versus Supernatural. A little change of pace for you folks out there watching. So, before we fully get down to business, I want to give a huge shout out and thanks to all of the Crusaders of Verity, the entire team, as well as the entire HQ squad. Shout out to Corimbus. Shout out to Captain Forrest. Shout out to all of them, the entirety of both teams. Go check them out. Subscribe. They all create great content. So with that out of the way, I'm going to hand the mic over to Beegerman, and he's going to go down the line and go over three of Palpatine's hacks that he has to bring to the table that could be possible win cons for him at the end of the day. After that, I'll go over three hacks and possible win cons for Chuck. So here you go, Benjamin.
Okay, yeah. So Darth Sidious, as probably everyone here knows if they watch Star Wars, he very much so likes using the ability known as Force Lightning. This is a Sith ability, or most commonly used by the Sith at least, that he has mastered over the years, have grown to be better than any previous Sith at using. So it would stand to reason that he can replicate the effects that they can as well. And he himself has shown to do these things. For those who don't know the full extent of the Force Lightning, the Force Lightning is described as being, uh, I think they describe it as being a release of your own hate in the ability of the Force, at least when used. But that is the case. And Sidious, he uses this to attack you physically, spiritually, mentally, and it also has a side effect that used by Sith that such as Count Dooku, and who himself learned everything about the Force Lightning from Sidious, being that it weakens life when it hits you. This is likely a side effect of the spiritual part of it, as life force in Star Wars is consistently referred to as being somewhat connected to one's spirit. How he uses lightning is, as many might know, he used it to torture or kill. Examples would be against Luke Skywalker when he went to torture him slowly and surely, shocked up the power to cause more and more pain, or how he went against Yoda in their first encounter when he blasted him to the wall. That was obviously a blast not meant to kill. However, when he does go for the kill, such as in his final part of the battle with Yoda, the effects is way more powerful and is obviously at that point not meant to kill. He does this against a teacher in the Empire's Academy. When he tried starting a rebellion, he instantly went for the kill, and its results are leaving a short corpse twitching with electricity. So now I'll hand the mic over to Corin. And
Alrighty. All right. That's a pretty interesting first win con, to say the least. So I would say that Chuck would be able to handle this. And the reasoning for this is because, well, first of all, for the soul aspect of it, Chuck himself actually doesn't have a soul inherently. He actually predates them, and he himself created what a soul actually is in the supernatural verse, and has also created angels and archangels who, in themselves, don't have souls and existed before the creations of that of souls. So, with that, I would say not having a soul to begin with, well, it's going to be pretty hard to manipulate such a thing when you don't have one to begin with. And for the mental aspect of it, well, God Himself is the reason why somebody like Dean Winchester has such an incredible will and mental prowess in that regard. And Dean himself was actually able to endure and take being tortured for 30 years straight in hell before breaking. He was being tortured by the yellow eyed demon, aka Azazel, and Azazel was torturing him. Azazel was torturing him mentally, physically, and spiritually for 30 years straight. It took that long for Dean to finally break. And the only reason Dean had that will to begin with is because of Chuck himself, as Chuck is the creator of the verse and everyone and everything in it. And it is because of him they can do what they can do. So, with that, I would say Chuck wouldn't have any problems with the Force Lightning.
Well, that's interesting stuff from Corin here about Chuck, and I would agree. The seems like the Force Lightning would not really affect him much. Well, so when since that's not gonna work, it seems like Sidious is probably gonna try his next one, which most likely would be the ability known as Force Storm. For those that don't know and haven't read Dark Empire, the Force Storm is an ability that Sidious had at that point mastered, with some describing it as him having perfected it. It's an ability that allows you to basically fold space and time. What this means is it allows you to teleport basically throughout these things. This was seen by Darth Revan, him having teleported through time. Sidious has used it upon his death on the Death Star. He used a small one to transport him light years away, and then used transference to move his soul into a body. That's how he survived. Even at that point, he could use things like that. And then against Luke in Dark Empire, he showcased that he used it to teleport Luke onto a ship. He has used it to transport himself again. And it's just an ability that causes mass destruction on everything around him, destroys planets, swallows ships, and just sends them wherever he wants. So I'm gonna hand over the mic to Corin and see what Chuck can do about this.
Alrighty, and that's honestly intriguing, Benjamin. So, with this ability, it essentially teleports the target somewhere else, essentially, right?
Yeah, whether this be through time or space.
All right. Well, with that, I would say Chuck wouldn't really have much of an issue in this situation, as not only can he himself teleport into different timelines, different dimensions, etc., but as mentioned, he also created angels and archangels, and these angels and archangels in themselves can teleport from heaven to the physical universe, to hell, to purgatory, etc., and these are all closed off dimensions. Some are actually spiritual in nature and run on a completely different flow of time from that of the physical universe. So, with that, as well as the aforementioned God himself being able to teleport and essentially go into different timelines entirely, different points in time, etc., etc., I would say he wouldn't have much of an issue with being transported or teleported somewhere in the first place. So, what would you say about that?
Well, all those are very interesting things from God here and what he's able to do. And yes, it would seem that this ability would not actually have much an effect, or if it does, he can just come back without much of an issue. So, with that out of the way, it's likely that Sidious would have to be forced into using his third and final ability that I will be covering here, and that is Force Sphere. Force Sphere is an ability that basically allows you to tap into your target's mind and find what they fear most and then make them feel that fear. This was seen very long ago in the timeline of Star Wars that even very low skilled Darksiders in compared to Sidious has achieved very, very effective usage of it. Sidious has then been a Sith that has far surpassed any previous one in his usage of the Force and in all abilities. Sidious has actually reached so much of a great skill with this ability that he has somewhat of an active passive aura around him that does it. This was seen by when Princess Leia first met him. She was instantly numbed with fear upon seeing the darkness in him. Basically, his very being radiates so much evil and darkness that it does the effect of Force Sphere just automatically. So, can Chuck do anything about this fear ability of Sidious?
Well, that is actually a good question. And this actually brings me back to Dean in a sense, as well as other demons. And I mentioned how a demon tortured Dean for 30 years. This demon, I'll go ahead and correct myself now. I accidentally said Azazel earlier. This was actually Alistair who tortured Dean for 30 years. But what I'm getting at is these demons themselves have, in a sense, their own type of fear manip. They can also mentally dominate you, spiritually dominate you. And again, Dean, even in the more earlier seasons, was able to handle 30 years of torture from Alistair. And again, God himself made Dean what he is with that, on top of creating angels and archangels, powerful archangels who in themselves aren't affected by anything that these demons can do in that specific regard. They're not affected by the mental domination, the fear aspects, etc., etc. So with that, I would say God, aka Chuck, in this situation as well, wouldn't have that much to worry about.
Well, yes, I would agree. From what I'm hearing now, it would seem that the Force Sphere ability would not actually work very well. So, with those three win cons out of the way, I'm gonna pass this mic on to Corin and see what Chuck brings to the table himself.
Alrighty, thank you, Benjamin. So the first thing I'm going to mention for Chuck will be his own soul manipulation. As I mentioned, he himself created souls in the verse. He can manipulate them, destroy them. So, with that, would Palpatine, the Emperor, have anything to protect himself from soul manipulation?
Well, that's a very interesting thought, and I would say that he does indeed. So, as I mentioned previously, the ability of Force Lightning does actually affect the spirit itself. Now, lesser Siths such as Darth Maul, who has learned absolutely everything that he does know from Sidious himself, was showcased that he used the Force to actually resist a Night Sister's form of Force lightning. These ones have basically the same effects. They're just called a different name instead of the Sith lightning. Maul, as he learned all of these abilities and his ability to resist these things from Sidious, which stands to reason that Sidious actually knows how to do it himself. This is actually further confirmed that Darth Vader, who has also learned basically everything about the dark side that he knows from Sidious, has been described that he knows Force Resist, which allows him to resist virtually everything that Starkiller could throw at him. This includes Force Lightning, and Sidious himself was then stated that he has mastered virtually all known and unknown abilities of the Force. So I would say that he more than likely does know Force Resist, as he taught people and they know it only thanks to his teachings, and that his ability of using it would actually be at least comparable, if not more effective than theirs. So I'm gonna pass
So,
the mic back on to Corey.
okay. So it sounds like it would stand to reason that Sidious could defend himself against soul manipulation.
Yes.
Alrighty. Well, that's cool. Moving on to WinCon, potential WinCon number two. So the second thing I'm going to bring up onto the table for Chuck is going to be his ability to manipulate matter. And his ability to manipulate matter is actually far superior to other angels and archangels who can already manipulate matter on a subatomic level. A good example of this is when Castiel, amped by numerous purgatory souls, he was trying. A good example of this is Castiel. He was amped by numerous purgatory souls. He was trying to become the new god, and just with a snap of his finger, he completely disintegrated the archangel known as Raphael on a subatomic level. So, with that, easily say that God will be able to affect Sidious on a subatomic level. Would Sidious have anything to protect himself from this?
Now that's a very interesting ability, and I do believe that he does. So, uh, all Sith and Jedi have been shown, or at least the very skilled ones, have been showcased to use uh, or create holocrons. Holocrons are described as being made from subtle alterations to crystals on a subatomic level. And then again, with Force Resist, it's described that Vader and other characters with it can actually resist virtually everything that is thrown at them from the Force. This would include these abilities, of course. Sidious himself actually knows this and all those, as previously mentioned. So I would say that it's very possible that he knows actually how to resist a subatomic alteration.
Hmm. Well, that's actually very intriguing, and I would agree. Huh. That's actually very intriguing, and I would agree with you on that more often than not. That yes, he should be able to handle that at the end of the day without too much difficulty. And again, he's one of the more experienced force users in that regard as well, and probably a little more, so to speak, fundamental with it than lesser characters compared to himself. So, with that, yes, I would say that is a likely possibility. And with that being said, I'll move on down the line to the third and final hacks and potential win con that Chuck has. That's going to be his plot and narrative manipulation. You see, as I've mentioned a few times already, he is creator of the supernatural verse. He essentially wrote the first 14 books and seasons of the series. He, wrote the plot. He can manipulate the plot. He can erase the plot. He can create new plots, etc., etc. So with that, would Sidious be able to handle a hacks on such a fundamental level?
Hmm, that's a very interesting question, and I do not believe that he is able to do that. From what I know, Sidious has showcased no such ability of resisting narrative and or plot manipulation. So I do believe that this actually would affect him and be able to take him down.
All right. Well, it looks like that's all she wrote. However, we could talk about another scenario, and that is what if we gave Chuck a lightsaber and had them duel in a lightsaber battle and restricted everything else except for the skill and knowledge they have of the skill? What would you say to that?
Ooh, that sounds very interesting, and I think we should do this.
Awesome. How about you start off with Sidious himself?
Okay, then. So Sidious, in his earlier appearances, such as in episode 3, he was shown that he is in the same realm of lightsaber combat as Master Yoda. Master Yoda has actually been confirmed to be the most skilled Jedi there is, with him having been consistently shown as being superior to Count Dooku. Count Dooku has very easily defeated characters such as Asajj Ventress, and she was one of the most skilled Sith assassins that he had, having far surpassed very early on Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker from the beginning of uh, Clone Wars. And this is very impressive considering that early on in the Clone Wars, Anakin had been able to fight a suppressed Count Dooku, with said suppressed Count Dooku having been stated as superior to Darth Maul. And Darth Maul was considered one of the greatest duelists of all time. Previous Sith having already mastered basically all lightsaber styles, and this is something Maul surpasses. At his time and era, he was considered unparalleled. Uh, this was actually upscale from previous Sith, as it's confirmed that each generation of the Bay Knight Sith grow more skilled, knowledgeable, and powerful than the previous. Sidious then far surpasses this level of skill, even in his episode 3 appearance. He then gets even greater in skill, as having, during Dark Empire, been in the same skill level as Luke Skywalker, who had actually been confirmed as far more skilled with a lightsaber than his previous versions. And in episode 6, which is obviously a previous version, he was shown as fighting on par with Darth Vader. Darth Vader, in an even earlier appearance, was shown that he easily beat a battle droid with the skill of hundreds of Master Swordsmen. Or at least, if I remember correctly, it was hundreds. It might have been 100. Sorry about that. But Sidious, again, he upscales from this very easily, with Luke having far surpassed this version of Vader, and then Sidious scales to that. So I would say Sidious, even in early versions, have far surpassed any previous Sith in skill, having mastered all lightsaber styles, and with later easily surpassing hundreds of Master Swordsmen. So now I'm gonna pass the mic on to Corin, and let's hear what he has to say about Chuck's.
All right. So getting right down to business with the skill of Chuck, at least in terms of swordsmanship, swordplay, etc., etc. While while Chuck himself hasn't necessarily directly shown any feats in that regard, there is some stuff to take into consideration, such as, again, if we look back at how Chuck himself created the entire verse, he wrote it, he wrote everyone to essentially be able to do what they do, how they do it, how they obtain what they obtain. And what I'm getting at is this would essentially include different types of swordsmen. So, barbarians, different types of swordsmen. So, anything from barbarians, knights, samurai, anything from barbarians, knights, samurai, ninja, different types of assassins. The list goes on. And this would include the ones who are masters of this style, of these styles, you could say, as well. So, with that, you could make the argument that Chuck himself would naturally know everything they know and be as skilled as they are with it. So, I do think this lightsaber battle is interesting. I think it's close. I think there could be an argument made for either one. However, me personally, I would lean a little more towards Emperor Palpatine in this scenario, and the reasoning for that is, first of all, more direct feats and scaling, whereas with Chuck, sure, while I do think it's okay to say does likely know all of the stuff that all of these different swordsmen on Earth know, he's likely a master, or at least he can make himself be a master if necessary. However, as I mentioned, not necessarily as direct, so to speak, as what Palpatine has. And that brings me into something else, and that would be experience. So, Palpatine has shown more hands on experience with these styles that he has, having mastery over these styles. And yeah, again, you could make the argument for Chuck that he could possibly have all the experience of swordplay and swordsmanship, these other swordsmen on Earth. It, again, in my opinion, kind of falls back to Palpatine is a little more direct in that regard, a little more hands on. And I think with that and his raw experience, this would be a good duel, good to watch in this regard. But for me, I would have to slightly edge out with Palpatine at the end of the day. But again, I could definitely see it going either way. I think arguments could be either way. I think it's interesting for both. What are your thoughts on the matter, Benjamin?
Yeah, I would agree with pretty much all of what you just said. Well, pretty much actually all of what you just said. And I agree that this is a very interesting topic and it would be really fun to see it go down. And yes, experience is something that I'm very happy that you actually brought up, as it's a very important thing that a lot of people forget. And the idea that, well, Sidious, they might have both mastered everything. There's the idea that experience is also there, and the idea that the direct showings is also important is something I definitely agree with. And while I agree that this is something that's very interesting and that there's arguments for both sides, I would agree that Emperor does take victory more often than not in this category.
Right on. And just to clarify with everyone watching, obviously, yes, God is technically older. He has more experience in that regard, but we're talking about from a more direct experience with this specific set of skills, so to speak, you could say, as I was going over a moment ago, while you could make the argument that God does have all the experience that his creations have, all these different swordsmen, I myself and Benjamin would lean more towards Palpatine in the skill regard for having more direct skill experience and mastery over these skills compared to Chuck. Essentially, less assumptions for Palpatine. But again, I could definitely see either side taking it. It's really interesting at the end of the day. So, with that being said, anything else you'd like to say, Benjamin?
Uh, all I really have to say is that it's been really fun being here, and I hope we can do something like this again sometime.
Heck yeah, for sure. So, with that being said, it looks like Chuck takes victory more often than not in a battle of hacks and special abilities and who can resist this, that, and the third. And when it comes to swordplay, swordsmanship, etc., I think Benjamin and I both agree that Sidious should likely take victory in this regard. More real. That being said, if any of you want to see any more videos involving other supernatural characters, possibly other Star Wars characters, maybe a power scaling video on a supernatural character, more versus battles, etc. Let us know down below. Hope you enjoyed this video for what it actually was. As always, have a blessed day, folks. Peace.